All right, what's going on, guys? Today is March 9th. This is for the week of March 9th. As always, we'll go over the economic calendar for next week. Couple news headlines I'd like to highlight that happened over the weekend. You had HIMS and Novo Nordisk or NVO. They re-sparked their deal for the Wegovy drug. So the interesting one with that is, I believe HIMS had quite a large, short interest going into the weekend. So we'll dive deeper into that. Other than that, it doesn't look like these Iran headlines are slowing down, or it doesn't seem like there's any stop to this war talks right now, or what's really going on. So that could definitely have some, larger implications on what the market does and how volatile it is throughout the day. And then we did have some S&P inclusions as well on Friday, so I'll go over that as well. Economic calendar, though. Let's see. So we do have CPI Wednesday and 10-year note auction on Wednesday, but CPI should be big. Jobless claims Thursday as well. And then we do have PCE on Friday and JOLTS as well. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, pretty bigger days in terms of data being released. Again, market hasn't been reacting too heavily to that economic data as of yet, but we'll see. Couple bigger earnings reports. Oracle on Tuesday after hours, that's going to be big. AVAV as well, huge defense company right now, which is obviously getting a little more light because of the war, so we'll see what they say. We have Futu on Thursday before market open. You have Adobe after hours on Thursday. You have Ulta in the morning on Thursday, or I'm sorry, in the afternoon Thursday. Yeah, not much going on this week with earnings, but yeah, decent amount of economic data, still a decent amount of headlines to look out for as well. Makes this week, just makes the environment not an easy environment to trade. So yeah, let's, with that being said, let's get into SPY and let's take a look at some of these charts. So trading perspective, SPY is it's really in a no trade zone. There's a couple things that you could take in terms of, levels back to the upside, levels back to the downside. But in terms of a broader market outlook while looking at SPY, the market's in no man's land. There's some stuff that works. There's going to be some stuff that doesn't. But it's really, as a trader right now, can you be patient? Can you look for those quality, risk to reward setups? And when they happen, and other than that, you just got to chill, manage your account. Looking at SPY here, though, we do have it testing decent supports over the past couple months. We are pretty stretched from the 9 MA as well. So if we do get that relief bounce, this 676 is going to be a big trigger. You figure we held that for, almost 2 months and finally broke under it last week. So if we do continue higher or get any war headlines, that's 676, 677, that's going to be the area I'm looking at to reclaim. But yeah, ideally nothing really looks good until we're back over the 9, back over the 21, back over the 50. The only other thing you can really look at here is you do have a clear defined range in terms of this low up to this high. So if we do continue lower, I'd be really interested in a little more swings down near this 662 level, where it lines up with the 0.72 Fibonacci level. That'd be a decent entry for a mean reversion trade. Yeah, even a little liquidity sweep under 663 and it tags 0.79. But that's really the only major long entry I would see me taking on SPY anytime soon. Let's see how that correlates with QQQ actually as well. All right. QQQ, similar theme in terms of, it's under the 9, under the 21, under the 50, but SPY is significantly stretched from the 9 and 21 compared to QQQ. And QQQ actually managed to hold a pretty strong quarterly support the entire week last week, even the past 2 weeks. You get these liquidity sweeps underneath, but this is a hold in my opinion. Let's take a look at QQQ's range here too. Slightly different. So, this is the other interesting part. Number one, these charts are not the same at all. So That's a rule, rule of mine. You don't have confluence, you can't really be, completely risk on. You need confluence for things to really work together. So SPY and QQQ, there's argument for it to hold up. There's argument for it to go down. By the looks of it, QQQ seems to be a lot more stronger than SPY. So that's one thing I'm gonna, keep in the back of my mind as I'm looking for things to trade. Tech seems to be a little stronger. There might be certain themes in tech that are keeping QQQ up. So that's what I'll ideally try to look for. But yeah, nothing until these are over, all of their moving averages, or get over and then give me that back test to show me that they're actually, not just faking me out or anything like that. But yeah, nothing on SPY and QQQ. Direction's unclear. I wouldn't expect anything to change, in terms of how the action's been the past 2-3 weeks. I wouldn't expect anything to change other than maybe we start following through to the downside. But again, let's see what, news headlines come out. There's a lot of factors that are going to affect this. But yeah, let's get into some individual setups. Let me pull up my list. Here we go. All right, so we'll look at some 10-300 setups first. So obviously, 10-300, if you don't know, that's when a stock gaps up 10% or more, and it has a 300% increase on its average monthly volume. So we'll take a look at some of those setups now. First one being AXON. So AXON we actually caught, a couple weeks ago in the Discord, right off the high volume close. This was a perfect entry. It gave you 3 tight bases in between the high volume high and high volume close, and gave you a beautiful breakout. And then, ideally gave you, 25 points pretty quickly. What this one's done though, I kind of took it off my focus list after that, but what this one's done is 1, 2, 3, 4 days, extremely tight base after a huge run. Price action stayed sideways, and look at the volume. Died down perfectly. We're approaching the MA. We based over the high volume high. I'm going to look for that crack up past 580, and then we should get that true 594 test, and then ideally 605 for me to start scaling out. But this one looks good for another move to the upside, another leg higher. Let's take a look at what's next. We got DELL. DELL, I did take one contract. I might get stopped out, might work, whatever. The position's really light with the first one. But if we do get that push higher off of 148, early this week, I'll probably look to add to my longs. Let's look at the range we have here. Yeah, it gets over 148, 149, you're looking at 150, and then, you obviously get 154 fairly quickly, but through 154 is a pretty big range. If I look at the 3 month, you have nothing in between there. Let's look at the 1 month. You really got nothing until 161. So that 150 area is going to be big. You might be able to get a 10 to 15 point rally off of that one, especially with the 10-300 day behind it. It has every right to, make that second leg higher. Let's take a look at, next one is U. So this one's, kind of at a make or break. Gave you the 10-300, based over the high volume close, very good. And now it's giving you that little manipulation candle. Is it going to break under the high volume close in the 9MA? If not, this is a phenomenal risk to reward entry for it to continue back up. And you could easily have trailing stops under the lows from Friday. So tight risk to reward entry could work out very well, and your stop loss would be really, really tight. FIGS is another one, so yeah, not really an entry. If you get this back test at 1590 early in the week, maybe even 1545 with that 9MA approaching, that could be a great entry for longs. And then you're targeting, what is this, 1750, dollar and a half, almost $2, and then through there you got almost 20. But momentum's there. Again, sideways action on price, decreasing volume shows you that little divergence going on, and it could pop back up. Let's look at AAOI next. This one's been, this is an interesting one. It has every right to keep running, but end of the day, you still need the market condition to be proper for anything to really work. So AAOI, I'm going to say I'm not really looking at it for a specific setup, for tomorrow or Tuesday. I'm really just going to keep this on my watch because I know how powerful the announcement was off that EPS beat. And I really want to just, I don't want to take my eye off of them in case anything happens, you know, quickly. Ideally, if it gets back over that 107, I'd be looking to go long again. But I'm going to see if I can get anything down near 84 again, you know, possibly 75. We'll see if it wants to crack under the 9 and, you know, give a little manipulation or a nice wick under, you know, nice liquidity sweep, anything like that. But point is, no setup, but I love the volatility here. I'm going to keep it on my watch. Then we have AMPX. So this is another one. Sorry, that's not it. Come on. There we go. So I do have this one in my long term, but you had a great reaction to earnings last week. You had a nice follow through after the 10-300 day. So tougher entry, but ideally what we're going to look for here. Can it test back into this high volume gap from 10-300? That would be ideal. You know, if it can do that, holds previous highs, holds the 10-300 day, can continue higher. You know, we'll see how the volume is when it comes down. Is the volume decreasing as this is falling? And then if it holds, do we get that pop in volume as well as the pop in the stock? But yeah, we'll see. So ideally 1603 wouldn't be a bad backtest area. I would love to get it lower though, but we'll keep an eye on this one. Great structure though. All right, let's see. Microsoft. So this is kind of part of that, you know, we'll start with Microsoft, but these are all going to be kind of part of that software theme. Software's been beaten up the past, you know, 2 months, 3 months, and I really thought it got overstretched, but it doesn't really matter what you think. You want to wait till you really see that turn. So that turn for me on all of them, you know, if I'm looking at the 9 and the 21, Microsoft's been under the 9 for what? You're looking since October 30th. It's been under the 9 MA. So, you know, 3-4 months here, as well as other software stocks. I'll show you those, but you have that first real switch and first real hold over the 9 MA. You know, tried to hold here, gap down right after earnings. So, you know, you have a follow through. You also have 9 MA trying to turn over that and cross that 21 moving average. So that would be a real tell there too as well. You haven't really gotten that until, you know, you didn't really get that until December, and even then the action wasn't that strong over it, so it never really gave you that go signal. Ideally here though, if Microsoft can come down, you get that 9 MA cross. If Microsoft can come down, test that 405 and hold, and give you kind of, you know, some sort of volume pump off that 405. But if it really just holds that 9 MA and holds that quarterly, that's a fantastic risk to reward area for this one to switch up and, you know, maybe start leading for some of these Mag 7 stocks. But yeah, the other main reason you're looking at this is because, you know, you do have confluence with other software stocks, which I'll show right now as well. So yeah, Microsoft off that 405 back test with the 9 MA holding, you can get. Is that really 421? Let me see if there's any monthly in between here that was, you know, recent. Yeah, here we go. Because you're gonna have a lot of chop in here. So ideally, that's that first pivot. Got another pivot. We'll leave those two, just to get some extra levels in here. That's a little. So there you go. You actually get another monthly right here. So you get that 405 entry. You could target 409 first, 415, then 421, just to give you a couple extra, you know, scaling out zones. Yeah, let's look at the software theme though. So Microsoft will wait for that back test, and then, you know, you compare Microsoft to NOW. Okay, Microsoft has potential to move if NOW is moving. Yeah, NOW, not really a setup here. I kind of just wanted to show you guys this just to see, you know, there's always going to be something that money's flowing into the market, and it's ideally a trader's job to find that momentum. But yeah, what I'd look at for NOW here, you know, if Microsoft backtests, you know, how aggressive is NOW selling off? You know, you have the 50-day moving average here. So does NOW, you know, give me 2 tight days of a base and then break up? Does it smack down off of this on Monday and not continue higher? You know, that's all the stuff I'm looking for. Ideally, it's a tougher spot with the 50 MA. That's a little farther than Microsoft. Ideally, if NOW retested 115, and then continued higher, you're getting a really good almost cup and handle formation at the bottom. And then it'd give a little time for these moving averages to catch up as well. So I'll probably wait. 115.34, fantastic back test area. If you get that hold, that should be the bottom for NOW. But yeah, there's really no entries up here. You know, you could try a short under that 123 if it got back under, and then your stops are these highs up here. Those are all fantastic trades. Just the way I am, I like to stick to the upside. It's just the type of trader I am. So, you know, I'll wait for those setups. I understand them more, and that's what I'll look for. But you do have a lot of good setups here. Oh, let's look at Palantir too. Let's stick with the software theme. Palantir is going to be another one, you know, and this is what I mean by confluence too. You know, if Palantir is dipping, holds the 9MA or even backtest 148, and then you have Microsoft near that 405, you have NOW near that 115. Like, you know, to say 3 software stocks are going to fail major supports altogether versus all of them hold, you know, a support is meant to hold, a resistance is meant to, you know, be rejected off of. So to say that they were all going to break together, it's you know, the odds are not in your favor. So, you know, just understand from a percentage perspective and what's possible. All of a confluing theme kind of holding levels together and moving together, they're probably going to continue to move together. So just something to note when you're looking at this. So again, going off that, if Palantir can get near that 148 and start bouncing with the rest of them, you know, you're looking for another leg higher in this software theme. Another example here. Actually don't have levels on CRM. Let's get some levels really quick. This will show you how to mark up levels too. You know, I just go to a 3-month. I got my color for my quarterly levels. I'll start around the actual price, and I'll go from left to right and just make sure I touch each candlestick to make sure all those quality stopping points, all these liquidity points are there for me to see. You know, and then this is going to help you pick out those bigger liquidity zones that you can play off of. But let me get these, you know, that's good enough for me. It might not be perfect right now. There we go. So CRM, you know, similar theme to NOW, similar theme to Palantir, but, you know, really tight with this moving average. If you see CRM following through, you know, or even holding up while the others are dipping, you know, that's going to tell you. So actually, just quick note here, the only thing I don't like about CRM and what you'll want to see, you do get some divergence here. I didn't need to do the trend line, but you get that divergence with price, you know, which could be a good thing. Salesforce can pop and that volume switches, but, you know, there still could be that one liquidity bar down and that volume also pops. So this is called the VCP, volume contraction pattern. Typically they'll want to move higher. I've seen them move lower, so just, you know, something to watch out for. But you do have good divergence here, hopefully good divergence. But yeah, the big takeaway from those is, you know, software is strong. You have some setups, good potential backtest setups coming with software. So those are what I'm going to be focused on in terms of, you know, what theme might be, you know, leading the next week or two. So that's where my head's at. We do have a couple more setups I'll go over. So Amazon was also a fantastic trade for me last week. I did go over it on that Sunday night breakdown video, so definitely last week's video. So definitely take a look. We took it off this 211 pivot. You know, waited for it for a couple weeks, finally got it. But yeah, ideally again, we might have another trade off that 211. So if Amazon does come down, test that 211 and give me that hold, I'll definitely try some longs back to the upside. You know, you figure you have a couple things here. Retest of a quarterly after a pretty large move, so you figure it has to happen. But 9MA also crossed over the 21, hasn't happened in quite some time. And if this price does come down and test 211, it's probably going to bounce off the 9MA as well. So you have, you know, 9MA cross showing you trend might be switching, and then you have 2 major forms of support being hit if it does come down and test that 211. So Amazon off 211 again, good breakout retest. See if we can get, you know, move back to the upside, and you could target that 217 again. So I'll definitely be looking at Amazon. Just another one to note. So VRT got added into the S&P on Friday. So typical action recently from S&P 500 inclusions, they will run into the inclusion. So I think VRT should be gapping near, I think it was 255. So funny enough, I'm going to look at this high volume close here, or just that close after the big high volume day. If it gets over 255, 256 with some, with some momentum behind it, this could run towards, 270, 280. I don't want to say 300, it's possible, but you figure that S&P inclusion should be the third Friday of March. So I want to say 2 weeks. That gives VRT a good runway for the next couple weeks before it gets, that S&P 500 influx. So we'll see what this one does. Definitely keep it on your watch. I'll probably look to go I'll go a little lighter, but I'll definitely look to go long for a few week swing if it gets over that 256. Let's take a look at, yes, I just want to show you guys Dave real quick. So big theme on this one, and you could see it right here. Run, base, run, base, run, base. Some of these earnings beats too are absolutely phenomenal. They're producing. So if you do like basic math, what was their last 4 quarters? 2, that's 260, 860. We'll say $9, 10, 11, 12. We'll say $12 to be safe. You're looking at a 16 PE ratio. So let's just see really quick. So let's do a 30 PE. Let's do a 25 PE ratio in terms of what their average is. Yeah, so just from a math perspective, this has every right to be over all-time highs, over that 290. It's valued near like 330, just based off of, price to earnings ratios and what their average PE ratio has been in the past. So a couple things I'm looking at. Every time Dave based, it's basing, then it has that last final switch over the 9 MA and that 21 MA. Everything crosses back together. So notice, let's go a little closer. Blah 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 blah, messy. Finally, that switch, and you get that big volume bar to really tell you when it's possibly happening. But then same thing, they chop up. Okay, 9's starting to stretch from the 21. There's that stretch from the 50. Again, some of these look too late. That's why you really have to tell that first switch and when it's possible, rather than when it's already happened. So that's what I'm trying to look at here. You're getting that increase in volume. Just had a great earnings report. 9 is over the 21, not over the 50, but one can assume, especially after the base. Look at the last one. Highs, little liquidity sweep lows, then makes its run. Makes its high, wicks again, little liquidity sweep low right here. Now it's trying to pop up again. Harder one to time, but this theme is really tough to ignore, especially when something's, look at this EPS report. 21,000%. So, I don't care what anyone really says. I don't even care if that's really just going to happen for one quarter. This company is in discovery. It's in price discovery. It's not established, And you look at a market cap perspective, 3 billion, these are companies that can 4 or 5x fairly quickly before they even hit 20 billion, which is nuts, So just something to note. Market cap, earnings reports, volume, and the actual setup has really good confluence for Dave to continue higher. So just something I'll be watching, Ideally, if it can have a little tight base back near this 9 MA, maybe I'll enter for a few months swing, but definitely one to keep an eye on. And then ASTS, let's look at really quickly, just because I want to show you guys something else. Let's take this off. So ASTS, one of those stocks that the 9 and the 21, not even the 21, let's just look at the 9. The 9 MA has been like the key, the answer. So let's start. I don't even know. Start here. Cracks above the 9. Rally. Cracks below the 9. Dump. Cracks above. Rally. Cracks below. You get a dump. Cracks above. You get a few pumps. You know, it's not going to be perfect. I wouldn't consider this a crack below either. You know, you got a quarterly, you got 3 moving averages. You gotta look at stuff, you know. Not everything's going to be the same. But point is, not only till you start getting follow-throughs, the momentum switches so cleanly with the 9MA for ASTS. So I'm looking at it again. Chopped up. I wouldn't even say this candle. You could have assumed it was switching up here, but this candle really switched up. All right, we're back above the 9. You got that follow-through. It's coming back down. Right here. So what I'll look at for ASTS, if ASTS gets back over 92.95 on Monday, maybe even Tuesday, I will look to go long again. This will be a bounce off the 9MA, and this bar can just go right back to 103 because that's the type of range it is. And, you know, just looking at the past, every time it gets through, switches that momentum, the 9MA is a launch pad. So I'm looking at this as a launch pad. I'm not going to enter right at the 9. I'm going to wait for my monthly, but let's see if that's a launch pad. Yeah, last 2 thoughts to leave you on here. You know, there's a lot of good setups there. None of those are like, you know, I'm pounding, I'm going full position, full size. I'm gonna chill for the next couple weeks, really, until SPY and QQQ can give me, you know, until they can really start trending higher, or just at least trending in a certain direction to make me feel more comfortable about what the market's doing. But yeah, let's take a look at HIMS. HIMS, I will definitely be looking to take a lotto play on Monday. So we actually can't even see the reaction on HIMS here. So I will say, their NVO deal, thought it was off the table. It was off the table. I'm assuming everyone thought it was off the table. There was really no indication of anyone knowing this news. That's the real interesting part here. So HIMS is gapping up to about 22, I believe, after hours. I looked up, you know, saw some stuff on Twitter, confirmed it myself. Their short report as of the close on Friday, sorry, short report, short float. So, you know, short interest open was 38.9%. So, you know, that's not factoring in the gap up, and that's not factoring in any opening price. So what these institutions, what could happen now off the open on Monday, if HIMS opens up at 22, those institutions are just going to be forced to start covering their shorts. So, you know, I'm not going to say it, but it has every right to give you that short squeeze off of that 40% short interest. So, you know, it's at 22, you figure 40%, you're looking at, you know, realistically, it could hit 35 on a short squeeze. So I'm assuming those contracts would be really cheap to play as well. So that's why I'm looking at it as a lotto. You know, this could be something you take $100 worth, you know, or less, and it has every right to 10, 20x if HIMS really does go off of a, you know, short squeeze. I'm not going to say it's anything like GameStop, whatever. I'm not going to say it has to go up, but just understand that information and you know, that short interest, it does make it possible. So definitely understand that when you're looking at this trade. Yeah, last kind of closing thought too, that I just want to go over. Memory. Memory's been it is still currently the largest, you know, grossing demand in the world right now in terms of what these data centers need. So just a closing thought. MU has tested the 50 MA 3 times recently. 1, ripped off of it. 2, recently after, huge rally off of it. Right now, couple things. Number 1, double bottom, triple bottom. All right. Number 2, almost a 2-month base on a name that's making a lot of money. So support, you have a base. Now number 3, you have a huge moving average pivot. So my bias is going to be that MU will continue higher from here and develop some sort of formation and continue higher. You know, that's my bias. That's just a thought. I don't know if I'll play it yet, but I would love it if MU does any reversal and gets back over that 390 area Monday or Tuesday. This looks like a double bottom, it looks like a rally off the 50, and it looks like memory can start again. So with that being said, you also now have a really, really, really good line in the sand. You know, MU tried to follow through under the 50, bought up immediately. Tried to follow through, bought up immediately. If MU has, you know, even really one more day below that 9MA, or sorry, below the 50MA, and starts closing, you know, near lows and gives you that one more red follow through, that momentum is switched up completely. You know, I won't look at memory as a leader until it's back above certain areas. I won't look at the market as, you know, more of a range. You know, that's when you could start thinking, okay, we have, you know, we really could go lower here. If they sell off winners, if they're selling off leaders, that's every reason for the market to actually start going lower with conviction. So, you know, just closing thoughts. I have my bias, but MU also, aside from my bias, it's going to be able to tell me the story of where the market wants to go. If they're not going to buy the best of the best, you know, what are they going to buy? And, you know, that's where the argument comes in. You could chase bonds, you could chase defense stocks, you could chase everything that, you know, is going up. I'm just going to chase momentum. You know, if that's a defense stock, great. If that's gold, great. If that's oil, great. I will find the momentum in the market and I will go from there. You know, if it's SPX to the downside, great, but we will see. But yeah, this inflection point on MU will be huge for what the market really wants to do. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, so just to close off, there's some great 10300 setups. You know, software is looking to be the best theme. We have a couple individual setups just from certain news outlets over the weekend. You know, that HIMS short report or short interest squeeze. Look out for that based off that news. Keep an eye out for memory. But yeah, let's have a good week. All right, see you guys.